Daf Yomi Tractate Bava Batra, page 14a, top of the page, with the words V'im ba lachtoch, etc. We're working next door, so please excuse the noise. Apologize for the noise. If he wishes to cut the scroll, he may cut it. The Gemara is surprised at this. What is the Tana saying? Why is mention made here of cutting the scroll? The Gemara answers, this is what the Tana is saying. He arranges the text so that if he finishes a book, at the bottom of one column, he begins the next book at the top of the next column without leaving any empty space, so that if he wishes to cut the scroll, he may cut it. If he does not begin the next book at the top of the next column, he will not be able to cut the scroll, because it is not fitting for a scroll to begin with an empty space. The Gemara raises a contradiction between this Braita and another Braita that teaches enough parchment should be left at the beginning of the scroll and at its end for winding. The Gemara clarifies, for winding around what? It means for winding around the pole to which the beginning of the scroll is fastened. This is difficult in light of what is taught in the first Braita, that at the end of the scroll enough parchment should be left for winding around the entire circumference of the scroll. And if it means for winding around the entire circumference, this is difficult in light of what is taught in the first Braita, that at the beginning of the scroll enough parchment should be left for winding around the pole. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, the Tana teaches the halakha disjunctively, referring to two separate cases. He issues a general statement requiring that enough parchment be left for winding as needed at the beginning of the pole, enough to wind around the pole, and at the end of the scroll, enough to wind around the circumference. Rav Ashi said, when that second Braita is taught, indicating that the same measure of parchment is left at both the beginning and the end of the scroll, it was referring to a Torah scroll as it is taught in a Braita. All other scrolls are wound from the beginning to the end around a single pole, but a Torah scroll is wound from both ends to the middle around two poles, one of which he attaches at this end of the scroll and the other at the other end. Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Tzadok, said, this is how the scribes in Jerusalem made their scrolls. In other words, with poles at either end so that it could be rolled to the middle. Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught, a Torah scroll should not be made in such a manner that its length, in other words, its height, is greater than its circumference. When it is rolled up, nor should its circumference be greater than its length. They asked Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, what should the size of a Torah scroll be? Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi said to them, if it was written on a hide that was treated with gallnuts, with gavil, it should be 6 handbreadths long. They asked him further, how much should it be if it was written on ordinary parchment, ordinary cloth? Rabbi Yehuda said to them, I do not know. Eini yodea. Why is Gevil so specific? Eini yodea is 161. The sages taught a Torah scroll should not be in such a manner we read this. It is related that Rav Huna wrote 70 Torah scrolls himself, and it happened for him only once that the length and the circumference were equal. Rav Acha bar Yaakov wrote the Torah scroll on calf hide, and it happened to have the same length and circumference. The sages looked at him and his achievement with jealousy, and he died from their envious gaze. Wow. The sages said to Rav Hamnuna, Rabbi Ami wrote 400 Torah scrolls. Rav Hamnuna said to them, perhaps he wrote the verse, Moses commanded us the Torah, Deuteronomy 33:4, 400 times, rather than 400 complete Torah scrolls, as it is difficult to say that he could have written so many, even over a lifetime. Similarly, Rava said to Reb Zera, Rabbi Yanai planted 400 vineyards. Rava said to him, perhaps he did not plant large vineyards, but only the smallest possible vineyards recognized by halakha, which are composed of 2 vines facing another 2 vines, with a 5th one protruding like a tail, extending out beyond the square. The Gemara raises an objection to what is taught with regard to the length of a Torah scroll from a Braita. With regard to the Ark of the Covenant that Moses fashioned, its length was 2.5 cubits. Its width was 1.5 cubits, and its height was 1.5 cubits. See Exodus 25:10. The cubit used for these measurements being 6 handbreadths. Therefore, the ark was 15 handbreadths long, 9 handbreadths wide, and 9 handbreadths high. 15, 9, 9. $15.99, let's see. Tiferet Shebegvura. Nice. Wow. The Batra continues. As for the tablets, their length was 6 handbreadths, their width was 6 handbreadths, and their thickness was 3 handbreadths. The tablets were placed along the length of the ark, one next to the other. If so, how much space did the tablets occupy along the length of the ark? 12 handbreadths. As each tablet was 6 handbreadths long, 3 handbreadths were left there along the length of the ark, for a total of 15 handbreadths. Deduct a handbreadth from them, 1 half a handbreadth for this wall, namely the thickness of the wooden ark itself, and 1 half handbreadth for the other wall. Accordingly, 2 handbreadths were left there, in which the Torah scroll written by Moses lay. Shne'emar, what biblical source indicates that the Torah scroll was placed there? As it is stated, there was nothing in the ark except the 2 tablets of stone which Moses put there. 1 Kings 8:9. What does there was nothing in the ark except mean? Ein ba'aron, rock. This is an example of a restriction following a restriction, as both terms nothing and except indicate that the ark was empty. And there is a hermeneutical principle that a restriction following a restriction serves only to amplify and include other matters. Miot achar miot. Ein ba'aron, rak shnei luchos. You could have said there were only 2 luchos in there. Or you could have said there was nothing in the ark except. But if it says there was nothing in the ark but only, a miut achar miut, makes sense. Double negative. In this case, it serves to include a Torah scroll that lies in the ark. The Batra continues with this explanation. You have accounted for the length. You've accounted for the entire length of the ark. Go now and account for the width of the ark, which was 9 handbreadths. How much space did the tablets occupy of the width of the ark, which was 9 handbreadths wide? 6 handbreadths. Therefore, 3 handbreadths were left there along with the width of the ark. Deduct a handbreadth from them. 1 handbreadth, 1 half a handbreadth for the thickness of this wall, and 1 half a handbreadth for the thickness of the other wall. Accordingly, 2 handbreadths were left there. What was their purpose? These were necessary so that the Torah scroll would be able to go in and out without being pressed. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and says the cubit used for all the measurements of the ark was 5 handbreadths long. 3, 4. The Sorry. Yehuda disagrees and says the cubit used for all the measurements of the ark was 5 handbreadths long. Therefore, the ark was 12 and 1/2 handbreadths long, 7 and 1/2 handbreadths wide, and 7 and 1/2 handbreadths high. And as for the tablets, their length was 6 handbreadths, their width was 6 handbreadths, and their thickness was 3 handbreadths, and they were placed along the length of the ark, one next to the other. If so, how much space did the tablets occupy along the length of the ark? 12 handbreadths, so that 1/2 a handbreadth was left there, which is 2 finger breadths. 1 finger breadth of those 2 was for the thickness of this wall, and 1 finger breadth of those 2 was for the thickness of the other wall. With this explanation, you have accounted for the entire length of the ark. Go now and account for the width of the ark, which was 7 and 1/2 handbreadths. How much space did the tablets occupy in the ark? 6 handbreadths, meaning that 1 and 1/2 handbreadths were left there along the width of the ark. Deduct 1/2 a handbreadth, 1 and 1/2 finger breadths for the thickness of this wall, and 1 and 1/2 finger breadths for the thickness of the other wall. Accordingly, 1 handbreadth was left there, in which the silver columns were placed on either side of the tablets, as it is stated. King Solomon made himself a palanquin of the timbers of Lebanon. He made its columns of silver, its back of gold, its seat of purple. The atomic number of silver is 47, and the atomic number of gold is 79. Its seat of purple. Song of Songs 3, 9-10. This is understood as an allusion to the Ark of the Covenant. And the chest in which the Philistines sent the gift to the God of Israel was placed alongside the ark, as it is stated, and put the golden devices which you are restoring to him for a guilt offering in a chest by the side of it, and send it away, that it may go. 1 Samuel 6:8. And upon this chest lay the Torah scroll, as it is stated, take this Torah scroll and put it at the side of the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. Deuteronomy 31:26. This means that it was placed at the side of the ark and not inside it. And accordingly, how do I realize the meaning of that which is stated? There was nothing in the ark except for the 2 tablets of stone which Moses put there, which according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir teaches that something else was in the ark besides the tablets themselves. It serves to include